Stop Now, a social experiment enterprise.
Welcome to Stop Now, everyone. I'm so excited to have this special guest. I hope everyone is doing well. Have Cora Rose today. Hello, Cora. Thank you for joining us today.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Tell everyone all about your story. Please introduce yourself to the audience here.
Well, thank you. I'm Anika Theill, and I'm an author, advocate, speaker, and military reporter. And I escaped domestic violence, rape, and several cults, including Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett's People of Praise cult. Years ago, I lost my 8 children, including my nursing baby, and seeking safety. And since then, I've been writing, speaking, and using my voice for those who have not found their voice yet and for those who are no longer here. And I just honor everyone's survival, just the very fact that they have survived. And I choose not to participate in the silence that protects perpetrators and isolates survivors.
Well, I just want to start off by saying you're very brave for being able to talk to other people about this and to be so open with others. Like I know that had to be a very traumatic experience for you, and to be able to be open with everyone and let people know what's going on in those situations, like
Mhm.
that's an amazing thing. How did it all start, if you don't mind me asking?
Right. It's good to start at the beginning because all of us we are born into different environments, different cultures, and some better than others. And I even wrote on my Bonshia Making Light of the Dark Facebook page this week about how many of us who have had to deal with childhood rape, abuse, domestic violence, we are working very hard just in recovery. So we may not be doing as well as others who have not had to process over a scar map of such things. But my childhood, I was born in Michigan. My father was a captain in the Air Force. About 4 years old or so, we moved towards the Washington area. And I lived near McCord Air Force Base for a lot of my growing up years. My father was ill for a while, so we lived in Kennewick, Richland area, East Washington. At that time, my uncle, when I was a young girl, he got out of prison and lived with us. He had executed his 16-year-old daughter and attempted to murder his wife, and he had raped all his 3 daughters. And he was not supposed to live in our town or to be around young girls, but our family had supported him during the short time. I believe he only spent 6 or 7 years in prison. He was given life, but he was released. And due to our family support, as a young girl, I remember visiting him in prison with my family. It was at Walla Walla State Penitentiary, and I was told that's where he worked. And I was never told his history. And my mother was sociopath, narcissist. My grandmother loved her brother, who was my great uncle, Herschel Stonebreaker, and they both put me in his room for 3 to 4 years of my growing up years, between 6 and 10. And I was threatened by him. I was raped by him. And that started my childhood. I remember just praying to the universe at that time, if I survive this, I want to help. I want to be a helper. And even at a young age, at 9, at the same time, those things were going on. My step grandfather would brutally beat me, and then being raped at night, and just attempting to sort things as you can. But I remember even as a young girl, there'd be bullies on the playground. And one time I helped a bunch of young children build an igloo, and a bunch of bullies were kicking it down and terrorizing us. So I threw a snowball at them, and I was sent to the principal's office, not them. And in short, I learned everything I needed to know about life in general, about how that works. Because even to this day, reporting abuse, even when it's documented, you will be re-victimized, you will be threatened. I've had that go on in the 25 years since I escaped my marriage. And I live under the Attorney General's Address Protection Program. And even though this was a fact, even before I was divorced in 96, the judge put me in hiding with my 3 young children and baby. And yet, even knowing from neighbors, doctors, that I had been abused, that other women had been abused in the workplace, my children had been brutalized by my ex-husband, a judge gave all 8 children custody to my ex-husband.
Wow.
6 psychological exams by the top psychiatrist in Oregon, and I'd proved my mental illness. A few years before, I'd had a collapse from a severe postpartum depression. I was just having babies, children, nursing babies, homeschooling, living in the middle of a huge amount of farmland in isolation, and had no family contact, wasn't allowed to contact friends. So I collapsed after home birth with no doctor care and hemorrhaging. And between 93 and 94, it was a very horrible time of severe depression and partial stroke, and I was not allowed medical care. Doctors would see me once, but my ex-husband would not allow me to see a doctor alone, so they had to dismiss me as a patient. And I was beaten. I was raped in this period where I could not barely speak. I could not clothe myself, shower, or barely feed myself. I lived with my brother off and on and was out of the home, and I could not care for myself or my 7 children, but I was used sexually and pregnant twice. My last baby, I survived. It was my 8th child, and my doctor literally said I needed to get safe before I died. And so I understood, even I was a member through my force, through my husband in the early years of our marriage for 5 years of the People of Praise, the same that Supreme Court Judge Amy Coney Barrett belongs to. And there was incredible amount of abuse I suffered, crimes were committed against me, and I would question. I didn't agree with a lot of their cult ideology and oppression and abuse of women. And the whole cult was created just to oppress and subjugate women. And we, at that time, I was not allowed to work. We had to give our deed to the community leaders. Thankfully, that deal fell through and we received our deed back, but tithing and basically lots of meetings. And I was threatened if I ever tried to leave the marriage or the cult, I would lose my children.
I'm sorry, you were in your marriage still, and then you were in the cult as well?
Yes, my ex-husband was a Catholic at the time we were married. I had been raised Lutheran. My mother was Danish, but in high school, during the 70s, a lot of people were involved in the Jesus movement.
Okay.
A lot of literal, what do you say, literal fundamental Christianity through Bill Gothard. There was these Bill Gothard seminars that would come through all the towns, and my teachers and fellow classmates invited me to go. And that was my exposure to Christianity. It was a lot about the umbrella of authority, God and man, pastor, man, wife, children. And it was very unhealthy. And the People of Praise cult operates like that. Most of them are Catholic, but they believe in speaking in tongues, miracles, prophecies. And of course, they're the only truth. And everybody else is poison water, and you're not allowed to see your family very often, not allowed to have outside friends. But the people within the cult, many of them are sociopath, narcissistic. So you didn't feel safe with them either. And I had an experience where I lost 2 babies at that time and miscarried and had to have DNCs. And we were scheduled Sunday nights for community night, Tuesday night women's meeting, Thursday night men's meetings, and then community service. So we were kept very busy, but we were required to go to those meetings. And one night after I'd had a DNC and I was still hemorrhaging, I was forced to go to the meeting. All the women in my group wanted to go shopping. In the community, you had handmaids. I was a handmaiden, and the handmaids had authority over you. They reported you to the head leaders, to your husband. And so they wanted to go shopping and I said, I can't, I just need to go home and rest. And so I thought that was a common sense decision, but I was mistaken. I was reported by my handmaid, Connie Hackenbrook of Corvallis, Oregon. She called my husband and the community heads because I had disobeyed. And by the time I got home, there was a car running and a cult leader was already in the home to watch our children. And I was forced in a car and taken to the head leaders. Ed Brown was my ex-husband's head, or husband at the time, his head. And so I was interrogated through the hours of the night. And I just
Wow.
came to go home. That's called illegal detention. And they just kept telling me I was poisonous, couldn't cut the mustard. What's truth? What's negative? What's truth? What's, all these questions. And by the morning, they had called everyone in the community and told them to shun me, that I was dangerous and poisonous. So people I'd been taking care of,
But, sorry to interrupt.
yes.
Hold on that. I'm a bit lost on that. So, what was the incident you said triggered them to shun you?
They shunned me.
What was the reason?
Because I got in my car and went home after a women's meeting because I was hemorrhaging and could not go shopping. I didn't have the health to go shopping. So that was my punishment. And I was then in disobedience to the whole community. I did not want to go back. I had wanted to leave, but my husband would not. So I was forced every Sunday in a car for 6 months to go to the Sunday meetings at the local St. Mary's Catholic Church in Corvallis, Oregon. That's where they held their community meetings. And I was forced to sit on the floor outside of their meetings. And my children even saw this. Other children saw this. Other members would pass by me on the way to the restroom. And basically,
We're only going outside?
Yes, outside of the meeting on the floor. And people, even this year, there was a lot of media attention. I did 20 some interviews between September and October when Judge Amy Coney Barrett was nominated. And my book's been out for 17 years, and I did document this all in my book. There's affidavits. People of Praise is known about my book. I've never been sued by anyone. I have a whole storage unit of paperwork, documents, affidavits, court documents, and audio videotapes for all these 25 years. I keep documentation, but even this year, Dr. Paul Hesburgh Sr., who was my ex-husband's best friend, and in his men's meetings, he was a part of that. He testified by audio, tape, and video to Stephen Hassan, who works up at Harvard. He's one of the top cult experts in America for the last 40 years. And I also have given my testimony to Stephen Hassan by video. But Dr. Paul Hesburgh said that he saw the crimes. He witnessed me on the floor outside of these meetings. He was in the community 7 years, even longer than I, with his family. But he witnessed what they did to me. All those.
So he was a part of the cult as well?
Yes, but he's testified, and he said, literally on video this year in October, to Stephen Hassan, that the community enabled, the People of Praise community cult, enabled my husband to be a predator in my own home. And he witnessed a lot of the abuse, knew about it, and knew how the cult operated, and knew about the oppression, especially the last 6 months I was there. But my husband was finally forced to leave because I would not rejoin. I would not.
Wow. So they kicked him out of the cult.
Yes. Yes, I would not submit. But then he found another one, created his own home cult in our home. And then he joined others. There was about 6 others that were just the same, all about the oppression of women and the subjection of women. And that's all the People of Praise cult is about. And I was not allowed contraceptives. I've had 11 children, or 11, and I lost 3 children. 8 are living. They're now 25 to 41, but they've been taught to hate me. I get hate letters from them. They even have judges read hate letters to me out loud in court. I've been in court 50 times in the last 25 years. My ex has legally stalked me, lived in my car for 3 years, tried to go to college, but I had too many court hearings to attend to. And then finally, my ex-husband and his attorney in 2004 appealed our court case to the Oregon State of Appeals, and I had to leave college. I was wanting to study to be a social justice attorney. I was getting straight A's, but I could not keep it all juggled. So I spent a year writing
Oh,
and eventually it was dismissed, but he was trying to sue me for another 50,000 while I was destitute, homeless, living out of my car. And he has succeeded in suing me for twice that I earn as a disabled and impoverished woman. So a lot of women around the world, throughout the United States and in Oregon, write me regularly. They've read my website articles. They've read my book, and they write me that they say, Coral, I've read your story, and I'm in a violent, marriage or relationship, but I have decided to stay because I don't want to end up like you.
Uh,
and I was going to ask that, sorry, JK, that, with your story, I know in the beginning you were saying that, even with just your uncle, they have so many supporters, like, your family seen everything that he did
They
and
knew.
just supported him anyway. You
Yes.
have your ex-husband that's out here that he did so much, but he's still able to sue you. Do you have, the women that are just looking at your story and they're saying, I want to come forward and leave, but, I at the same time see that it didn't, that's really unfortunate. But are you able to talk some people out of that,
Oh, yes. Well, no. There's about 1 million women in America and all over the world. This is in Europe too, in all countries. But when we seek safety, many of the judges are no different than the abusive husbands we are leaving. They have the same traits. They're patriarchal. Some of them believe they should punish us. I did have a restraining order for a couple weeks. The first time, it was very frightening because you know what's going to happen when it's overturned. And a judge said I hadn't checked a box correctly, so he overturned it even though he knew I was living in danger. That was Judge Collins, and he also received an award. Um, so I've been in front of 9 different judges, and most of them all abusive. Even a woman judge, Judge Paula Brownhill from Astoria, Oregon, um, she took away my right by court order to write my children or send them gifts ever, or to have any contact through a third party. And they all know my children have been abused. They know that my daughters were raped. That's another layer of my story. But during the period I was ill, my husband at the time in 93 and 94 brought in his mother, my mother-in-law. She's a very extreme Catholic. Her children were raped in her home for years, and I was afraid of her taking care of my children just because she also had a hatred towards me because I was not Catholic. But my children, my daughters, got raped under her care by an older son. And when I came back in the home, I'd always taught my children to come to me. I'd read them appropriate books. Uh, but they did. When I came back in the home and I was well, after those 20 months of severe depression and no doctor care, I did crawl out of this very deep pit. And I was 5 months pregnant with my child, and my daughters came to me and they told me what had happened. And I then sought to get my son out of the home. I then knew legally pastors, priests, teachers, police, parents are vital. Legally they're to report it. Well, my husband, his Baptist pastors, his cult leaders, all threatened me that I could not report it. They said they'd put me in the Oregon Mental Hospital. They were threatening me if I didn't obey them and my husband, what they were going to do to me. And at that time, I sought an attorney. I got a friend from Longview, Washington, Addie Archer. And she's like an adopted mom, and she came down to Oregon and watched my children so I could secretly go to an attorney and report the crimes in our home, along with marital rape, along with the crimes against me. And he first said that I needed a restraining order, needed to get safe first, but things did not work that way. And I did report the crimes. The whole family thinks of me as an enemy because I betrayed the family by reporting these crimes. My daughters were taken from me before they could ever get adequate help, and they never did. They were told that this was no big deal. And
And that's the unfortunate thing. And if
yes,
they don't get any help, this cycle will continue through
this is
generations
common.
to the next generation.
It's common in patriarchy. If you follow the Duggar family that was on TV with a large family, one of their sons had molested sisters, babysitters, and even as an adult, he's having problems, but they never reported it. They just got, pastors to counsel him. And my son was a registered Oregon sex offender. He could see my daughters anytime and I could not. And I was the one that got them help. I tried to get counseling started. So in patriarchy, this is very common. It's very common. Women will not report marital rape. It's in many patriarchal churches where women are required to submit in all things, like many of the environments and churches my ex belonged to, you just accept. You have to accept it, or there's further abuse. And I write about this extensively in my book, and I find many people are very ignorant. I just wrote a letter to some Marine and Navy officers who betrayed me a while back while I was raising money for them. They, at the last minute, brought in a fundamental Christian who was a domestic violence advocate without me being able to vet her or without telling me. And I've been writing them, telling them that the church is the worst place for any domestic violence, rape, or child abuse victim to go to. That is documented. Every expert knows that. And I've never seen a pastor give a comprehensive sermon on domestic violence or rape, but I find in the military, in schools, churches, homes, this is an ignorance that needs to stop, and we need to stop blaming and shaming victims. But my daughters never got help. My husband, after my son was a registered Oregon sex offender, had the case expunged, but my son was able to see my daughters anytime. And that was really painful for me. And as far as my childhood, 40 some years later, I reported my rapes to the Kennewick police. I was on a program in California about this for people wanting to learn more about people's lives. After I got off the program, I said, you know, nobody reported these rapes. Nobody protected me. I'm going to report these rapes tonight. So I did call, and my great uncle had passed already, but I just felt I wanted to be one of the statistics, because 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 4 boys, and that's on a small scale, it's quite a bit larger, I think, will be raped by the age of 18. And most cases are not reported. So those are the only cases we know. And I've received thousands of letters. My audience is 1 million or more a month on my social media page, but I receive thousands of letters from women and men, and they have never reported their rapes. But it does change you. And you lose your voice. You lose your identity before it was ever able to form. And I was a straight A student in high school, a co-valedictorian. I soloed and, soloed. I was taking flying lessons at age 17 by requirement of my father, and was a court reporter by age 19. But emotionally, I did not know. There was a lot of pieces of myself I did not know. And I was a compassionate human being helping others. But it took my breakdown at 38, a full collapse, and to go over the scar map of my psyche of what led to this, what led to that. And I, in those 20-month period, was able to find myself. It was a horrible time, but I was able to find a good portion of my voice, and I was able to find the courage to just leave. Even Christians telling me I was going to go to hell, and everybody abandoning me, and people even testifying against me. One state senator, Betsy Close in Oregon, she did lose her she lost by landslide a few years ago because I did publish her audio tape in court, but she was my ex-husband's best friend. They were both speak in tongues, they're fundamental Christians, and they're the worst kind to have in politics. They're the far right. They're the ones who want to oppress women's rights and all human rights. But she testified in court that I didn't have a right to divorce and that battered wives should just call 911. That was under oath. And we were just stunned, anybody that was woke in court, but I was asked by people in the Justice Department who'd read my book, you have the audio tapes, could you publish them? So I did publish a letter. I had written about her in my book, but all the people who were against me keeping my nursing baby were pro-life. My husband was chair of pro-life. Betsy Close was a pro-life advocate. My mother-in-law was pro-life, had even supported people who were more dangerous pro-life. And those were all the people who wanted to take away my children and baby. And in the church, it was Bridgeport Chapel in Monmouth, they didn't even believe in a woman's right to divorce. So they were all in the front row, even knowing I'd been abused. So it's been a horrific time in seeking safety. And
And how did you
Oh,
find your way out of,
out.
the craziness? That was
It was
a
crazy.
lot
Yes.
for years.
Yes. Well,
Like, a
and
lot of people
also,
would have completely broke and not made it out.
also to just add to the story, I met my husband on a Vancouver Portland Oregon bus during the fuel crisis in '74, and I never gave him my phone number or my last name, but people were talking about my father on the bus. We all knew each other. My ex was an engineer, so he was riding the bus just because you couldn't get gas. But he met me and he heard other people talking about my father. My father flew the FBI during the DB Cooper case, which was in Vancouver, Washington. And that's where I was taking flying lessons, was at Pearson Air Park. And so, we would talk about things like that. And my husband picked up my father's name. And a week later, he was at the doorstep of our home. He looked up my father's name in the phone book and got our address. And I didn't have any assertive skills. I couldn't get away from my own family. We're all abusive. I did not know how to get away from this man. And his name's Marty Warner of Independence, Oregon. And he's done very well all his life with his abuse, even in the workplace, has abused women in every workplace. They've all written me. People, my book has a contract with Google, and all the names of judges, attorney generals, governors, pastors, priests all come up. And so when people are abused by a pastor, they may look up his name. And I've received many letters from women still being abused by the pastors who abused me. I received letters from women who've been abused by my husband in the workplace. And one woman, Debbie Custis from Hewlett Packard in Corvallis, came forward at my court case, and she wrote a long affidavit. Her case is huge and thick. For years, she was abused and harassed by my husband, by even witnesses, supervisors. And Hewlett Packard did nothing. But this repeated in every place he worked. So when I had my 8th child, I almost died. I was in the hospital 3 days hemorrhaging, but I was hemorrhaging before I got to the hospital because my teenage son had been violent with me. My children were acting very much like their father, which is common. There was no respect. I was nothing more than how he thought of the tractor or his property of the farm. I was just a worker, and I had very little sleep, was expected to homeschool, can 400 quarts of fruit every summer, farm, be a secretary, care for the whole home by myself. And I literally, knew I was breaking down. But when I finally was well back in the home, and a year later, I reported the rapes of my daughters. I wanted my daughters and my son both to get help. And at the time, seeking an attorney, I did not know how to help myself, but he did tell me, get a restraining order and then legal separation if you want to start that way, and divorce. And so it just tumbled into that order. And then I reported the crimes in our home. But nothing went well other than my son was arrested and was an Oregon sex offender for years. But he blamed me, and the children blamed me. And that's how the church operates, is to scapegoat somebody, and you're now the criminal in their eyes. And I have found, whether it be evangelical Baptists, any of the cults he belonged to, the People of Praise, Catholic, all of them treated me the same. They were my judge, jury, executioner. They've written me hate letters. Some of them called me, and I'd have to say, I'm not going to listen to this. But they all have brainwashed my children to hate me, and even to this day. And I have a book out, website. I'm participating in a documentary with a New York film producer. I've agreed to participate in a lot of projects. I've interviewed with the Department of Justice, who documented my case as one of the most extreme domestic violence rape cases. Oregon advocates have too. My book's been used as a college text in Oregon for nursing students. My marital rape case was published 3 years ago by the New York Sexual Assault and Violence group, and it's called Reclamation. But I was pleased they printed the judge's name, my husband's name, pulled down court documents and published those, and to bring awareness. And like I say, I'm paid my rapist, my baby, my nursing baby was taken from me, all my children. When I tried to visit them, my mother-in-law and my husband would tell me when I could see them or not, even with a court order. And I wasn't allowed to talk on the phone to my children when I had court-ordered phone time. My children were being taught to hate me at a young age. And even when they visit with me, they said, Mommy, we're not supposed to listen to a thing you say. And they've told us when we get older, we'll understand better. But then they break down and cry and start telling me about all the abuse in the home. And I could not protect them. I'd already, the first month of court had cost $150,000. I was forced to sit through 45 hours of abusive depositions. In court, they humiliated me about my childhood rapes, my breakdown, just the way I look, body parts. It's like whatever form of shaming and humiliation they could do, they did. And even though doctors wrote the judicial, it was the Judicial Commission, I believe, nothing happened there. I wrote to the Oregon State Bar, reported, I believe, ethics violations and cited the law, nothing happened there. I do have a federal motion I've written. I don't have an attorney, but I have studied federal and state law, and I know dozens and dozens of laws that were violated. So to all the women, there's men who have been abused too, I do recommend finding a healthy, non-religious, licensed counselor, and have someone that you can trust to speak with. Dr. Barbara May, professor of nursing at Linfield College in Portland, Oregon, became my mentor in '97, and she was a gift. And she understood my story. She understood cults. She was an expert in domestic violence and a rape advocate. And she invited me to speak to her college students, use my book as a college text. But she's been in my life through all 50 court hearings, even filing affidavits, and judges have just dismissed her. So they don't even listen to the experts. But I also share that as a victim of any sort, to be aware of predatory therapists and doctors. I was abused. HIPAA violations were violated by my doctor that the court assigned to me. He got another person involved who was a Marine and a non-licensed PTSD therapist for the VA. And that person eventually threatened, stalked, robbed me of my credit cards, life savings, and then broke into my apartment and beat and strangled me to an inch of my life. And it was through my doctor, Charles Kuttner of Portland, Oregon, who's had no repercussions. He even admitted he violated HIPAA laws, gave my information to this a very predatory person. But I was stuck in this place where my doctor had a reach in court, even for me to see my children. And then with this violent person that he invited into my case in life. And you are very alone in those situations. Then you're just in another situation of trying to figure out how to stay alive and how to stay safe. And so after that incident of attempted murder in 2000, I did get a restraining order, but the VA, knowing even about this and knowing this man even admitted that he tried to kill me, they kept him as a unlicensed therapist for the VA for 13 years. And I republished my book 7 years ago, and I called a woman director in Tacoma, Washington. And I said, I'm about ready to republish. I've been writing you all for 13 years, but if anybody wants to do anything now, that'd be a good thing. And within an hour, she had read my story, the documents, and she fired them and scrubbed their websites and put a bolo out throughout the US. So I've had a few wins. After my book was published, my husband could not find a job for 4 years.
Great.
Was hired in a Mormon community as an engineer these last years, and they were supportive of him, even knowing he'd abused women in the workplace and abused and raped me. So I find that even as we see our government operate, since the Me Too movement, I believe it's better, but it hasn't helped my case. And I was just in court a couple years ago and sued for another $38,000 as a woman living under poverty level to pay child support to this man who has a $500,000 debt-free estate and makes $8,000 or so a month.
They have you paying child support as
Yes,
well?
I was ordered child support from the moment the judge took away my children.
Oh my goodness.
And then it was doubled to twice of what I earned in '99 at a hearing I wasn't told about. So I'm going to share that 1 million women in America have experienced similar cases like mine. When you seek safety from a violent man, you can expect to be betrayed, even betrayed by friends. He will bring in his family, he'll call your friends, and he'll, there's a word in the advocacy movement, flying monkeys, they call it, that he'll use other people, that he won't be doing sometimes the abuse, but he'll use other people. And it becomes—
That'll drive you insane. Oh my goodness.
And the fact that I dated my husband, I did not know how to get away from him. And then eventually I was working as a juvenile court reporter and secretary to Superior Court judges in Longview, Washington, when I was 19 to 21. And he immediately moved up there. He was working on his master's degree in Oregon at OSU, but he brought his project up to Longview, Washington, where I was living. And he'd be on the courthouse steps every day. And I did not know how to get away. I was young with no role models, with no people to talk to, and I was just trying to stay safe. And he was very much like my mother, grandmother, great uncle, just that predatory behavior that you know you're not safe, you know that you're being treated different than other people, and you just have to be careful. And then there was one night I was raped by him. He just came to my apartment late at night after he'd worked um, with his family on the farm. And I had no one to talk to about that other than Christian friends. The fundamental Christian friends just said I was damaged and had to marry my rapist, that was biblical viewpoint in those days. I don't agree with any of that. And I don't agree with
Oh,
any form of patriarchy. I'm just there to help people who have been abused in the name of God like I have. But there are so many people caught in patriarchy. They're born in it. And I find that's a form of child abuse, to be forced to believe these things. And so my marriage, I married him. I didn't want to. I even tried to cancel the wedding before, but there was 1,000 people at our wedding. And I just didn't have the tools. I do have much more in my toolkit now. And I do have the same courage I had then. I just know how to get safe quicker. And I do tell people there is a time to be silent. You can't always be a voice. And I share safety, safety, safety first. And even as a child, I had to be safe. I had to sustain and survive rapes most every night. And as a young adult, I did not know. There was just a lot of things I did not know. And there was no healthy teachers, no healthy role models to go to. And in my marriage, no healthy people. You'd talk to pastors or priests, and they'd tell you that I needed to learn how to obey better. So it's been a long journey, and the court trauma has been literally devastating for my health and my life, and it has kept me in poverty. And even the last judge, I'll say his name, Judge Monte Campbell of Polk County, Dallas, Oregon, literally said at my 50th court hearing, while I was being sued for another 3,800, while I had provided all kinds of documentation for them, he literally said I had a problem all these years and I must be wanting to fight with my husband in court. And he literally knows I live under an address protection program from this man. But the most difficult thing too is when you seek safety, and for the women who choose not to, is you're having to stand in court next to the person who has beaten you, who has raped you, and nobody, it's not like a criminal court, nobody cares. And
right.
and you're having to stand there with your perpetrators. So one thing I did, I left as far as the east as from the west in 2005, and the rest of my court hearings have been a lot on phones. Sometimes they've denied me phone hearings, so I've been just sued without attorney or being able to be present, but I haven't been in the courtroom, and that has helped. But I do now everything that I can do to heal, healing, and just honoring and cherishing myself is my highest priority. And I found there's a lot of predators like my ex-husband out there. They're in the workplace. They can be anywhere, and they will treat you in the same degrading manner. But I say there's 4 things you can do. You can ignore, you can confront, you can resist, or walk away. And I choose that by just what seems right for the moment. Sometimes, just walking away is teaching that other person, you have no right to treat me that way. My other thing is I often confront. I either write them or tell them what they've done and how abusive that was, to let them know that's not okay for me. Abuse is not okay for me. And abuse deserves no privacy. I think a lot of people, even judges, felt they could laugh about my rapes in court with my husband, which they did. They could humiliate me. They did all kinds of things in those 50 court hearings. But I wrote a book. I've spoke at colleges. I spoke on TV, radio programs, blogs, your podcast today. And I believe there's no accidents in life, and I'm just so happy to be here. But I will just share, it is a very hard journey for rape and domestic violence, child abuse victims. And often you may not be able to have a voice. And it's nice of your program to give even my story and others a voice so people can learn who want to learn.
Thank you for joining us today. For those that are watching and they want to, reach out to you, women and men, like you say, they go through these situations every day. How can they get in contact with you?
Well, I have a website. It's www.coranikattheill.com, and my email is at my website. They can reach me by Facebook. I'm Anika Theill on Facebook, and a lot of people do send me personal messages, and I will contact them with professionals who I trust, who have compassion, who have experience with battered women going through this horrific court system. And there's many of us who've written books. Many of my friends have experienced the same. I did want to share one thing with all trauma survivors. I wrote in my book that the traumatized person who accomplishes the work of recovery and healing has the potential of becoming more integrated and more aware and conscious than the person who has endured no blatant trauma and has never had to piece together a shattered psyche. And that is true.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. And once again, thank you for sharing your story. That was definitely a journey. Like I said in the beginning, you are truly a brave woman for all that you went through, and you're able to share it. And I commend you so much. Like that was a lot. And to, keep going every day and be able to, uplift other people and let them know you can get through this. That's just an amazing thing. So thank you so much for all that you are doing for other people. It's beautiful.
And I will share again for your listeners, it is the church that is the most dangerous place to go to. I was further abused and re-victimized. I was betrayed. The church up to this day, for the last 25 years, has supported my ex-husband. And literally, people can read the affidavits at my website, in my book. So many people have come forward, and yet they continue. Even my children, they run Christian ministries in Oregon, and they continue to come to court hearings and further abuse me. And they have kind of this huge group that agrees with them. But I just would caution anyone, that is just any expert's well-known knowledge that the church, I don't care if it's Catholic, Jewish, Christian, whatever brand, it's the most dangerous place. And people come to me and they say, well, I go to a good church. And I says, well, excuse me, I'm the woman in the back room with your pastor at your good church while I'm being abused. And you won't know about it other than I've written a book, but you may think it's a good church. And I wrote in my book too, a victim's first scream is for help. A victim's second scream is for justice.
And thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story.
Good to be with you.
Yeah, we will try to engage more in the future.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
We'd love to have you again.
Thank you. Thanks for being there.
Yeah. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye for now, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Stop Now, a social experiment enterprise. Stop, listen, share. Everyone can make a difference. We are on a mission. Everyone should do something greater in their lifetime. Change the future. Be a proud member. Join us to support, volunteer, and donate.